Good afternoon. Okay, can I see a show of hands who can hear me? Great, looks like everybody can. Thank you so much. We will now move to session 7. And I would like to, for session 7, I would like to call upon Matthias, who is going to be our moderator. So, Matthias, and do we have Mr. Francis Ogwal? Not yet. Oh, Francis, yeah, good, thank you. I saw Juliet Cabrera, and then Miss Martha Siregar from Indonesia. Martha, yeah, please come over. Okay, Matthias, so I hand over to you.
Great.
And when you're done, yeah, Juliet is here. So.
Juliet, please join in the stage. Can you hear me? Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here and also for joining in these 2 days of discussion in the forum. We'll start the first session this afternoon that's about discussing and sharing experiences on developing, implementing the national biodiversity strategies and action plans, and discussing the resource mobilization financial plans countries are implementing. As you know, in December 2022, the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework was adopted, and now, when adopting the framework, parties commit to set up national biodiversity strategies to implement the framework. This implementation requires that they develop the strategies and action plans that need to be consistent and being monitored, consistent with the monitoring framework, but also to develop a financial strategy plan, a financial plan to implement it. And today we are pleased to receive 4 distinguished panelists. We'll first have an opening talk by Francis Ogwal. Francis serves the National Environmental Management Authority from Uganda. He has more than 25 years of experience serving policies for nature conservation and environmental protection. He's actually the CBD focal point for Uganda, and he has served the CBD in several roles, including being chair for the development of the last GBF, Global Biodiversity Framework. We also have Mrs. Juliet Cabrera. She's Director General of the Rwanda Management Authority since 2021, and in the past she also served as Director General of Environmental and Climate Change at the Ministry of Environment, and she was a chair of the Executive Committee of the Multilateral Fund for the Montreal Protocol. We also have in the panel Dr. Misikire Tesema. He works at the Ethiopian Biodiversity Institute, is the national coordinator of the Early Action Support Project, and is in charge of the update of the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plans and national reports to CBD. And he also had served several positions related to coordination of biodiversity projects and reporting to CBD. And final and not least, we have Ms. Marta Siger. She's planner at the Ministry of National Developing Planning at Indonesia. And she's dedicated to developing the Indonesian strategy and action plan and focuses on resource mobilization, financial solutions, and monitoring. I ask you for a warm applause to welcome them. We'll first have an opening talk by Francis about the global view and of the developing and implementation and resource mobilization strategy of the GBF, and they will have a panel discussion with all the panelists. Please.
Good afternoon. I don't know how I'm going to orientate myself with the presentation. Is it going to be shown, Matthias? The presentation on PowerPoint? Oh, I'll try to see it from here. Okay. So I'm going to be looking at developing and implementing the Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and the need for action. So we go to the next. Okay, so basically this is an introduction to where we are with biodiversity globally. I think everything bad that we could have wanted to happen to biodiversity has happened. If we want it to be more worse than that, then things will be very bad because the species are disappearing, ecosystems are degraded, and we heard most of these things being said in the morning, and mainly because of those factors you see on the other side here, the direct and indirect factors, they don't act in isolation, they really operate together to give us that state you are seeing over there. But things are very bad as you'll read it. Now, this was, if the global data we have been talking about are analyzed. I don't know where I can point from here. Okay. Can I point? I can't point. Okay. If you look at the global data when it was analyzed from the data that is available on biodiversity, that is where we are. We are actually heading much, much, much worse off to the point that by 2020, when the framework was expected to be there, we should have begun taking action, and possibly by 2030, then we could come back to where we are not losing, we are just beginning to get back to normal. But as it is, it looks like 2030 is going to come when we have not even had that opportunity to do that. So things are very bad, and we need to take action. Now, this is developing the Global Biodiversity Framework. It came from decision 1434, that was at COP14 in Egypt, where those two co-chairs were designated, myself and Basil Van Hav, to help parties to agree to the text of that through a working group, what it was called then open-ended working group. And then the process was meant for actually 2 years, but ended up being for 4 years, courtesy of COVID, and you'll see all those dates then. We started in 2019 Nairobi, February 2020 we were in Rome, March 2022 Geneva, June 20 Nairobi, and then December we were in Montreal, just before the start of COP. So it took a longer process, but in many ways it turned out to be beneficial because people really did give their very best into the process. But this framework is not a standalone. It builds from the strategic plan for biodiversity 2011-2020, and also it is really closely linked to the achievement of the SDGs. And we heard from parties that we needed to make that process very much linked to the 3 objectives of the convention, and which we did. So these are the guiding principles, overarching principles we had to follow in developing this framework. Because I only have a very short time, you can ask me later on about them, but there were 13 of them. As we are co-chairing, we needed to make sure that we are following that. And I'm very glad that there was a lot said about this framework. I may not say much now, but look at its vision that by 2050 we will have valued, restored, conserved, and we are using nature wisely so that these services will continue to get and continue to flow. So 2050, that is when we should be living. By that time, we should have already been living with the nature. Let's not wait for 2050 because most of us, I still don't know whether we shall be there, but hopefully, yes. 2050 a bit long. The mission is there, halt, reverse, loss of biodiversity, and then it has those goals and targets. This I will not go on each, but the 23 targets, action targets, covers all those. I've actually summarized it for you. Now, if you look there, is there anything that this framework has left out that is so? Climate change is there, issues of livelihoods and other things are all there, the women, the youth, name them. So you're talking about biodiversity, but we are talking about the other aspects, pollution, everything is in here. And that's why this framework was very much given a lot of time and discussed holistically. So what is the dream? The theory of change of the framework is that we are going to get from this worst state here. But by 2050, everything, if you want, the Garden of Eden will be back. Is that going to be possible? With all the increasing population? But that is the dream, that we should have a better planet by 2050 through taking those actions. And some of the colleagues have been pointing that out, which I'm very grateful about. I can again get back there if time allows. So what is needed if we are going to implement this framework? One, we have to revise and update our national biodiversity strategies. You've heard about that, because it is the vehicle for implementation. No, you can't implement this framework if you don't have NBSAP or if you have not aligned your NBSAP to it. And then the target should be smart. And we also need to have a monitoring system in place, but also do a study or do policy coherence review. And then we, of course, need to look at the aspect of national capacities. Now, what are the challenges? Some of this again came up. One of that is limited expertise. Biodiversity has so many dimensions: species, ecosystem, genetic. Some are not even visible. Can one person do all that? You've been talking about the other aspects now of natural capital accounting. Some of these are difficult, and we need expertise there. Then data. You need data to support planning, evaluation of these natural resources, inadequate institutional capacities. This is the other thing. It relates to the other one, lack of expertise. It is another area. And governance and coordination, private sector engagement. I heard previous speaker saying there has to be kind of where private sector will see the economic returns or something like that to their engagement. So this is a challenge here. Then biodiversity and climate change, we have no control over that. Sometimes monitoring the status and trends, democratic factors, but also low funding. Those are some of the challenges. Then opportunities. Where there's a challenge, there should also be opportunities. Where do we see opportunities? One is that forums like this, we come to realize that we need capacity building if we are going to move forward with implementation. Two, this natural capital accounting. That is a critical area, because for some people, their question is, as you've asked here, so what is it? If we lose, what happens? If you can't answer that, then they say, you first wait, let the biodiversity wait. And yet loss is occurring. And the other one, I talked about technology transfer, monitoring the status, resource mobilization. This is the other opportunity. There are development partners and even other individuals who could be interested. Mainstreaming biodiversity into national development plans. If you do this for most countries, anything you are doing that is not within the national development plans, then it is outside, and you can't get resources for that. Good governance and partnership. Conclusion, as I don't know how much time I've used. I think I'm within the time. Yes. So in terms of conclusion, one, you've heard this yesterday, you continue to hear it, that we need that whole of government, whole of society approach. You don't leave anybody behind. If you leave people behind, then we say you go and do your business. We are also doing ours. But because biodiversity benefits all of us, we need to bring everybody on board. Then those targets should be smart. But there are other issues. There are capacity building, technology transfer. I talked about it. The IPOs is the youth, gender. The youth actually are the ones we need to engage even more, because there are some of us who have reached a stage where you cannot change their mindset. They don't change no more. So, but we need the youth as much as possible. Then integration of these biodiversity values into those planning processes, development processes. And this is in target 14. So this is where the NCA comes in. And that target. Then financial resources. There are possible sources where we can make additional financial resources. And they are listed there. One of them is leveraging from private finance, climate finance. Two is use of innovative schemes, payment for consumer services, green bonds, biodiversity offsets, benefit sharing mechanism, blended finance. Those are some of the areas we can get additional money. But it is not so easy. Some of them are more of a process thing. How long are we going to engage the private sector? Or how long are we going to have issues with the payment for services done and then eventually can say it works, whereas loss of biodiversity is continuing. So some of them are process issues. I need to understand that. Increasing financial flows from developed countries, including through ODA, to at least 20 billion per year by 2025, and then 30 billion by 2030. That was the commitment that parties have agreed to. And if that can come, surely that could help us. By the way, the financing gap, as identified here, you've seen it in the money, it's about $700 billion. So there's a lot at stake. But also we need to increasingly do well in mobilizing domestic resources. And the GBF, some of you could have heard, the Global Biodiversity Fund, the Framework Fund is now operational. So, and I think a notification has gone out to parties to access those resources. And also under digital sequence information, there's a possibility of establishing a fund there as well, but it's still under discussion. So a lot of opportunities to be explored if we are going to have the money to implement this framework. I think, is it the last one? Let me see. Not yet. Those are some of the other key decisions you just need to take on board, because this framework, you can't just get that framework alone and don't look at these other decisions. So there's a lot of guidance on these other decisions you see, which covers all those topics. When you're implementing the framework, you have to refer to them. And some of them I have highlighted their key aspects. And so that is it from me. This is my co-chair, Basil Van Hav. We worked so hard for 4 years, and to stand here and begin hearing many, many people making reference to GBF, I tell you, it is very humbling. I thought I wouldn't hear that. But now, by God's grace, I'm also following on how the implementation is going. So thank you very much.
Hello. Thank you, Francis, for this is a wonderful and very concrete overview of the GBF, as well as the challenges and opportunities, and having this global vision is really important to have it present and then go into implementation. And the last 2 days, we've been hearing amazing examples of how to use natural capital accounting and data for helping to implement the framework. And today we have wonderful discussions on policy instruments to try to implement and be in harmony with nature. But for implementing that vision of being harmony in nature, we need this broader view that needs to be implemented. And for doing that is that every country is developing their national biodiversity and strategies and action plans for trying to help this not as pockets, but as a global strategy that we implement together. And that also have a lot of challenges. So to reflect on this, I will ask now the panelists, starting with Juliet, if you can share the experiences of your countries developing the NBSAPs and the challenges that you are facing for the implementation or envision you're going to face.
Good afternoon. I made sure to use Francis's mic because the presentation was amazing, and I thought that probably the mic had a role in it. Yeah, so my name is Juliet, as introduced. It's an honor for me to be here to share what we are doing in regards to implementing the KMGBF framework. This is, like Francis said, was a long journey. Some of us caught it along the way, but we are very blessed to be trying to implement it. So in Rwanda, through the support of the GEF and with UNEP being the implementing agency, we are in the process of updating the NBSAP. And this is work in progress. But again, we know that we have to make sure that all the targets that have just been mentioned have to be included. We first of all have to understand what these goals are, what the targets are, in details, because like the previous presenter mentioned, it's not even enough alone to look at the framework, but to also understand the spirit in which that framework was being developed. So looking at, consulting at all these decisions is critical, because it will serve as a foundation of an implementable NBSAP, so that we are already working on, and we are bringing on board IUCN and ICRAF. I don't know if they are in the room, but we believe that these are knowledge powerhouses that can help us to come up with a document, a strategy that is going to help us, bring back all the biodiversity that we need. Identifying these alignment areas is what we are working on, and we believe this is going to be ready by August this year. We have set a timeline, so by August we should be having a revised NBSAP. NBSAP, sorry.
No, we can pass to Ezequiel. Thank you a lot.
Good afternoon, and I would like to thank the organizers for giving the opportunity to present the process and the steps we are going to develop the Ethiopian NBSAP. When we are talking about the NBSAP development, what we did was we were to go through 4 fundamental steps. One was what the global provisions were that we have to take, that we must take into consideration, and what the national circumstance we are in. Say, for example, whether we have the institutions in place which will implement the targets that we are talking about, the financial capacity, and the expertise. And the third issue that we took into consideration for revision of our NBSAP was the lessons from the past. What did we learn when we were implementing 2011 to 2020 targets? What were the success and the failure stories during that? As you know, GF finances NBSAP developments. GF finances development process, but we have not received any coin for the implementation of those NBSAPs the targets that we developed then. That's one lesson. And the other was the target 20, IT target 20 has promised us that there will be sufficient finances for the targets that were planned. And yet, during 2011-22, we didn't see anything that came in the name of the implementing the NBSAPs we developed. And the fourth lesson, the fourth thing that we took into consideration was the fact that Montreal Biodiversity Framework is the continuation of the strategic plan 2011-22. From that, we were to see what were successful, where did we fail, and how should we go about. There is a project called Early Action Support Project, which contains 4 components, and one is aligning the NBSAP, the 2011-2020 NBSAPs into the new ones, into the 23 Montreal Biodiversity targets. After evaluating these 4 issues, what we did was we were to go through the intent and the contents of these 20 targets, and then we were to set a stage. For that, we established project planning and implementing team within the National Focal Institute, which was to establish those who will be involved in the development of NBSAP. That is National Steering Committee, which will give the strategic directions during the process of developing the NBSAP. The other one was the establishing National Biodiversity Technical Team, which was to do with technical capabilities or feasibilities of the NBSAP that we are developing, targets I mean. And the third one, establishing the task force and their composition, professional composition, institutional composition, who will actually involve in aligning the Ethiopian previous NBSAPs to the GBF 23 GBF targets. And we, at the present, are on the process of aligning the NBSAPs. The NBSAPs actually, implementation level, from the goals, we know we go to the targets. From the targets, we go to the actions. The lead implementing institutions were assigned at the actions level, and the challenge that we faced in our implementing out the previous NBSAP was there was no finance that was promised in the IT target 20, and there was a lot of frequent changes in the focal points. Every lead institution had assigned a focal person who will report at a quarterly basis the level of implementation of the leads. And the people were often changing, and we commitments between institutions, and the shortage of data and networking was other problems that we faced during the implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sikir. We'll repeat the same question for Marta, please, to share her experience. Thank you a lot.
Yes, for Indonesia side, we are involved for the development of NBSAP, or we call it in Indonesia, Indonesia Biodiversity Strategic and Action Plan, or IPSAP. We are involving several stakeholders. That the main stakeholders, or we call it the main team for developing this IPSAP is Ministry of National Development Planning, which I came from. Our responsibility is to coordinating the development of IPSAP, so it can meet the framework that we already decided, and can meet the timeline that we have. And to developing this, we also have a close coordination with the Ministry of Forestry and Environmental, Ministry of Environmental and Forestry, that as a national focal point for the CBD, and also the sectoral ministry that has responsibilities to manage the forest and also the environmental, and also the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries, Ministry of Agriculture, and also the scientific agency, or we call it BRIN, to make sure that our IPSAP is based on evidence and scientific approach. And we start doing the development of IPSAP since 2021, but not much done in 2021 since the global framework is not decided yet. But in 2022, we established the framework, we have the timeline, and in that framework, we have we decided to have one indicators as a main goal to our biodiversity management. And in 2023 until now, we are start to develop our national target, and we start to looking how can our national target meet the global target, and also we are start to updating our biodiversity status in Indonesia. And also we developing a monitoring framework, communication strategy, and also the resource mobilization strategy. And good things about this, we start early about the development of IPSAP, because at that time in 2023, Indonesia, or the government of Indonesia, need to updating their long-term national development planning for 20 years, and also the mid-term national development planning. So since the timeline is quite the same, we are put that the draft of IPSAP that we have at that time as the background study to developing our long-term national development planning. So we can say right now that in our national development planning is the IPSAP is already reflected in our long-term national development planning. The long term is for 20 years, and for the midterm is for the 5 years. And we are realized that to have the successful implement of IPSAP, we need to have a resource that be ready when the time need to implement. So, but when we are looking about the available funding that we have, at that time for the average in a year, and compared to the financial needs to implement 8 target in our previous IPSAP, we found out that we have 74% gap, financial gap. And when we are looking to see the available funding that we have, we found out that it's dominating by the public funding. So in our new IPSAP and our biodiversity financing plan, we are trying to reverse this composition. So we are intends to have to make the private sector more involved to implement the IPSAP.
Thank you very much, Marta. This was a really great summary of the experience of Indonesia. Francis, I would like to ask you if you can share with us the experience of Uganda, but I would also like to ask you if you can give us also an overview of the main challenges of implementation that you're facing there.
Yeah, for us in Uganda, the first thing we do whenever we are back from COP, if there are some of these key outcomes that needs to be known to the nation, we do what we call briefing, back home briefing. So when we came back from COP 15, we held a briefing on the outcome of COP 15, and it focused on the GBF mainly, because that was the main thing. And from there, people really understood what the GBF is, why it is important, and what do we need to do next. So after that meeting, I was guided by the stakeholders now to do the following one, call a meeting of partners. And these partners were drawn from government, they were drawn from academia, research institutions, NGO, private sector. And just to let you also know that when we are doing the development of our NBSAPs, all focal points are there of these other conventions. So from that meeting, we then established a very strong partnership which is now running, comprising of even the private sector. We have actually developed a roadmap for Uganda, I can share that, of what needs to be done to enhance implementation of the GBF. And in that partners meeting, all these other stakeholders, whether from government, academia, research institutions, private sector, convention focal points, they did align themselves, they did indicate which target of the GBF they're interested in. So that one we did. Then the other one, now we have an experts team which meets regularly to actually do the alignment of the NBSAP to the GBF, because the first assignment is for you to quickly do a rapid review to see whether your targets currently in the NBSAP talks to GBF. And that one, I think we're going to be finishing by end of this month or early April. As I speak now, ICRAF has already sponsored a meeting, people are meeting in Kampala, and there's capacity built all over, so even if I'm not there, work is going on well. Then we are going to have consultants who will help us to do further work, review and setting of the targets themselves now after the alignment, then monitoring system, policy coherence review, and biodiversity. Challenges, what's happening? Yeah, I think it is there. In terms of challenges, the major one are the following. One is data. You see, every time you are thinking of reporting, the issue of data comes up. Do you have the data? And even when you're trying to set a target, what is the baseline? So data has just remained like a very big hurdle that we need to address. The other one are the resources for stakeholder consultation. This is a process that you don't want to do it one or twice. People have to understand you. Am I running against time? And then the other one is on the technical and institutional capacity. We still need to build capacity there. I think those are the major three, but others are there. I think in the interest of time, I could end there. Matthias, thank you.
Thank you, Francis, for this great overview. And you just finished with resources of a challenge that all of you have been mentioning, or if not, for sure it is. You mentioned it earlier during the opening speak. Earlier this morning, Matthew was talking about the importance of how to design finance for implementing GBF. So I would like to build up on that and now ask you to reflect more about the challenges to build the financial plans. And starting by Juliet, I would like to ask you if you can share with us some successful examples in Rwanda for resource mobilization for biodiversity conservation, and and the importance of data and accounting for helping to implement those things.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think the question raised is how do we get innovative to raise the required resources to be able to implement these strategies, the NBSAP that is revised, that is, has targets that we have to report towards. We are all looking forward to a 2050 where we're going to be living in harmony with nature. So I'll be sharing from Rwanda's context. And we have a dedicated fund, the Rwanda Green Fund. And this is a government fund that was put in place to mobilize climate finance. And those are back in the days when we didn't have a clear, integration of climate change and biodiversity loss. Now we know better, and we don't intend to separate these two concepts because one is a factor of the other and the other way around. So in the same Green Fund, we are opening up a biodiversity facility. And this is, if you want, you can call it a specialization of resources. The fund, again, is going to be tasked or is already tasked to look for these resources that can come and, fund biodiversity-related projects. It's not easy to find these like a standalone project, but whatever project that is going to be funded by the fund has to have a clear eye or clear targets on biodiversity increase. So this facility is in the final stages. We are actually working on the manual of the facility, and we have a lot of hopes that this is going to help. So the sources of resources of this facility are going to be, first of all, domestic oriented, domestically mobilized, and here we can think of fines and fees that we evoke when someone is going against environment-related laws. My institution does that all the time. So these resources, instead of going in a pool or a basket of resources, if it is biodiversity related, then these resources are going to be channeled into the facility. But we are also looking at philanthropy organization, be it locally but also internationally. And then Rwanda has just completed the green taxonomy. This was launched at the margins of the COP28 in Dubai. So this is very exciting for us at the Rwanda Environment Management Authority, because when my organization was put in place, we thought we are going to do mainstreaming, we are going to do awareness raising and name it. So this taxonomy came up as an idea from the private sector, from the banks. So they were like, you're always talking about funding green projects, but what does that mean in the first place? We don't know what a green project means, because some people come asking for resources, maybe to construct an eco-lodge. And that can be a real eco-lodge, or it can be something that is next to that. But what is the criteria? How do we qualify that this is a green project? So the criteria were developed by the private sector themselves. Obviously, government and experts in this sector were all available to work together to come up with these criteria. So this is very encouraging, because at least it shows that the finance sector here in Rwanda is already sensitive and has come up with this set of criteria to prevent greenwashing, basically. So, and here, part of the criteria is your project has to be nature positive. We are looking at this like, clearly you're not going to tell us you're going to fix a structure like this hotel. What's the percentage that is left for for the green space, but more than that, what type of trees are you going to plant? If there are trees, if there are trees, are they native? Are they indigenous? Because we know this again speaks to life in general. You might have trees, but it's not enough. We need to have trees that are meant for that microclimate, but are also friendly to other life, like bird life and so on, for them to survive. So this for us is another initiative that I want to share. The other initiative is redesigning harmful subsidies. There are a lot of incentives that the government creates, and sometimes I'm from government, but I know that sometimes some of the incentives that we set are also a disincentive to biodiversity. So we thought it's necessary for us to map out all these incentives and see what are those ones that are not in line with what we were part of in endorsing the GBF, and we're not looking at, turning around those or removing or scrapping completely these subsidies, but how do we repurpose what we already have to point to the direction that is going to be, important for biodiversity regeneration. So this is a study that is underway. We are looking at May to have the final findings. Very excited to have these and to share them with especially the financing is the Ministry of Finance, because one of these subsidies, again, are in terms of finances or tax waivers and so on. So this, when ready, again, in the same period as we revise the NBSAP, I think it's a good position to be in so they can speak to each other. The other incentive that I would like to talk about is the natural capital accounting. I will not be able to talk about that because I think that has been mentioned throughout this workshop. And then transparency disclosure. This is coming at the level of financing institutions, but it's also coming at the level of private companies. My organization is encouraging, but I think encouraging is almost coming to the end, and we are going to require that we get this disclosure, we get these reports to be able to know what we are working with. If you cannot have this transparency from, again, from all the members of the society, it will be hard for us to measure and know where we are regarding the progress that we are supposed to be making. So that said, we need tools to monitor progress. And what we have right now is a biodiversity information system that was developed by University of Rwanda. The indicators are still limited, but we want to build from that. At least something has already been done by the University of Rwanda, the Center of Excellency for Biodiversity Conservation. I think that's the right name. So from the call that we received from the GBFF a few weeks ago, and we are targeting the submission of 1st April, we think that we can actually choose to push those resources in developing a countrywide biodiversity information monitoring system. Because if we are embarking on this journey of putting all the resources here, the private sector has rose to the occasion, at least we need to have the tool for us to be able to trace and monitor the progress that we are making. So I think presence of data is key, is necessary. So we need to have the right tools, the right targets, the right indicators to be tracked. Again, having the university as part of the ecosystem is critical because universities have the resources. I was going to call them manpower, but it's beyond that. They have the resources year in, year out. So if we have this monitoring tool and then work together with universities who always actually are in the business of doing research, surveys on particular indicators. So we think we can have this data eventually available and be able to trace the progress that we are all looking for. If I can share that for now, thank you.
Thank you very much, Juliet. This is an impressive rate of progress that Rwanda is doing to close the financial gap, including public funds, greening the financial system, and harmful and reviewing the subsidies, and we are eager to see the final report in May about the subsidies. I would like to follow up with a question to Ms. Ikire, and I would like to ask you if you can tell us about the experience about how the financial planning in Ethiopia is being developed, and ask you specifically if you can go deeper into how you are planning to mobilize private funds in Ethiopia.
Thank you very much. In Ethiopia, the national targets are not developed simply to be the targets. They were incorporated, all of them are incorporated into sectoral plans. And there is a phrase which calls NBSAPs are country-driven, which means countries must be serious to commit something for their implementation. And those sectors to which the targets are in mainstream to be implemented at a year-by-year basis are financed, most of them are financed by the sectoral budget. And what we did before, 55% of the finance required to implement the national targets were covered by the government budget. They are called leading institutions. Those leading institutions are members of the National Steering Committee. Their plan directorates were members of the technical committee and the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Planning and Development, and the Standing Committee of Agricultural Affairs, who are the most important decision-making bodies, are the member of the steering committee, and they negotiate the additional funds that they were the implementation of this additional targets into their annual plans will incur. That is what we have done. They were planned. The financial plan is planned by year, and targets by targets basis. Implementers are assigned as actions levels. They know what the implementation of those additional NBSAP activities will cost them year by year and by target basis. Those gaps and the requirements of finance were submitted in our early NBSAP planning and will be done the same. Were submitted to the GF and to the Secretariat. Unfortunately, we hadn't had any response, but they were planned year by year and target by target basis. The actions of the targets, all the targets were mainstreamed into sectoral plans. Sectoral institutions were to have negotiated and were to negotiate with the Ministry of Finance plan ministry to secure additional funds to implement those NBSAPs. This is the way how we developed our financial plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ikire. This is impressive work as well. Thank you for sharing it. We've been hearing about examples of the strategies to mobilize finance and experiences, but I would like to ask Marta if you can share us your experience more reflecting on what are the main barriers to mobilize finance and what in Indonesia you are doing to try to overcome those barriers to mobilize finance.
Oh, yes. For Indonesia, I've made 3 points here that the main barriers that we may have. The first one, like I said previously, that our biodiversity budget is more in public funding. So, hang on. Yeah, and especially it's coming from our state budget. So we are trying to make the funding is available for the funding is coming from the private sectors. The first thing that we need to do is we are trying to ask the private company to implement the tax nature financial disclosure. And also right now for the government budget, we have budget tracking, biodiversity budget tracking. So with this system, we can see that in which program that is related to biodiversity that funding by our state budgets. And we are trying to extend this system to be also available for the non-government organization and also the private sectors. With this, we can see that how much money that already available for biodiversity management. And the second ones that may have a challenge for us to increasing the resource mobilization is that right now we don't have dedicated institutional about the for handling the financial resources. So we are trying to have the institutional financials so that they can see how much funding that are already available in our country and in which area that may need to more increasing the financial. And the last one is that we saw that it's very limited actors that really understanding about the biodiversity management and biodiversity itself. Usually they only know that biodiversity is only related for the endemic species, kind of like that. But since we know that biodiversity is a broad issues, so to tackle this, we are trying to mainstream the biodiversity. The first step that we do that, we already inline that with our national development planning. That the second one, that in our IPSAP, we will have the communication strategy. With this communication, we are trying to talk to every stakeholder so they can have the same understanding with the government or the NGO. So with this, we hope that it can be interact the financial that need to implement the IPSAPs.
Thank you, Marta. This is impressive work on trying to overcome barriers for unneeded transformation. Francis, I would like to make you a more general question, and I would like you if in 3 minutes you can tell us, so then we save some time for questions from the audience. If you can tell us that you have broad experience like working in the international community and helping countries and actively working in Uganda itself. If you can reflect with us about if you think this GBF have the right level of ambition to really implement that vision of living in harmony with nature, and if it is, if it's feasible to reach it.
Yes, you can hear me. First, to say that one of the things that's going to catch up with us about the GBF is going to be the timing, because the process, as I said, COVID interrupted. So instead of starting implementation, say in 2021, now we are talking of 5 years or so having gone off. So 2030 is not very far. But the hope is this, that, as I said earlier, that the GBF is not coming from nowhere. GBF has built on from the Strategic Plan for Biodiversity 2011-2024, which most countries already had their NBSAPs aligned to it. So it is a question now, as the process requires, that you look at what your NBSAP is saying and how it already could fit. So implementation of some of the ongoing activities within the current NBSAPs already contribute, actually, to GBF. The only thing is, as was said earlier, the data collection to help you really say whether you are getting close to the 30 by 30 or not, or if restoration is going, as we are projecting that 30% of the areas will have been, 30% of good areas will have been restored by 2030, or that all areas will be under spatial planning by 2030. Now, that needs a lot of data and support for us to do that. So one of the things we need to do if we are going to see parties achieve this GBF, I think support, technical support, needs to be upscaled, but also these financial aspects which we are talking about here, because sometimes you want to do something, but again, you're constrained financially. And the other beauty of NBSAPs also is that for most countries, I think they have done in such a way that it does not stand alone. Because if you make NBSAP to stand as NBSAP, government may not fund it because it will be like double expenditure. So you have to make sure that your NBSAP is aligning itself to sectoral plans, to different areas of government programs, so that as they fund that program on the other side, all you need is reporting on what the other agency is doing. So there is hope actually that we could have this framework implemented. And then the other one is the biodiversity finance plans. Most governments or parties did benefit from biofin projects and develop their national biodiversity finance plans. Now, some had started to implement, but we need again to review and see how it aligns to the GBF. So as I'm saying, there are already systems that have been in place. I think what needs to be done is how does GBF, or how does the process now take advantage of that, address the gaps which are there, so that we can enhance implementation. But partnership is the other thing that we need if we are going to move forward. And at all levels, either with the private sector, with the NGOs, with the partners out there, you cannot do all these aspects of biodiversity alone. You can't. Like a study on natural capital account, there might be a certain research body outside and they want to do partnership with you. So how do we reach out to partners to make sure that we can actually implement some of those areas that requires partnership? And that partnership also help us in resource mobilization. Something I picked this morning was the benefit of, and since I think yesterday and when we came here, how financial flows could be enhanced through application of the natural capital approach. Because people who allocate money listen more about in economic terms when you're speaking to them. If it is this species is the only one here, it's going to disappear. So, Francis, what happens if it disappears? These are things that some people just don't understand. You're talking about species, and some of them are to just say, so what if that species has gone? But you see, we have to demonstrate the economic losses that a country will be going to incur. For example, in Uganda now, if you do anything to a mountain gorilla, I don't think nobody will allow you to get close to that habitat or do anything, because it brings in millions, billions of money every year. So those are the kind of things I think there's opportunity, but we need to see how we work together to address the gaps that we found out for the strategic plan for biodiversity 2011-2020. There were mainly two. Capacity building was low, resource mobilization was low. And that is why now, this time round, you see the GBF has already been operationalized. GBFF, you have heard about it. The money may not be that much, but it is, they are saying every time there is money put in that basket, they're going to be announcing more tranches, more tranches. So I think there is hope, really. Nature is for our own survival on this planet, so I think there is hope here.
Thank you. Please join us with a big applause to this panel that we learned a lot. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll use the last 3 minutes to take a couple of questions from the audience. So please raise your hand if you have a question. Okay, we have 3 questions, so I think we can take them, the 3 of them together, and then we take the responses.
Thank you very much. My intervention is not a question, but I want to just share a little bit experience. In last January, I had the chance to participate in a regional dialogue with the CBD in the same context, how to assist countries to revise and update the NBSAP in order to achieve the GBF targets. And among the question we discussed, how capacity development and national capacity needs assessment of development of the NBSAPs. So one of the recommendations I returned is how we need to engage and forge strategic partnerships among various national bodies, partners and other stakeholders in enhancing capacity and of the implementation of the GBF. Regarding the national biodiversity financing, we discussed a lot how to identify and implement various financing solutions using, for example, innovative financial instruments. And one other gaps that we discuss it a lot is for example how to consider including relevant targets or commitments from sector and cross-sectoral strategies and plans and made under other international process as well as commitment of one state actors, because this is what join I think Mr. Francis, we had a lot of investment in many projects to update the NBSAP, but once this project is finished, there is no structure, or the countries make indicators for each convention apart. We need to make finance for all the sectors, for climate change, for biodiversity, for desertification, and with this approach we will have I think the gaps of data and capacity building, and we have a whole vision for whole countries and to help to implement this GBS, because we believe that GBF, it's not related only for biodiversity. By achieving the targets of GBS, we achieve all the other conventions. Thank you.
Kanaka, thank you so much for the opportunity, and excellent panelists. The presentation was good and the sharing of experience was very good. My question goes to Francis. Francis, I'm from Uganda, and I would like to really thank you for the good presentation. The work you're doing globally and the work that you're doing in the country, which I'm aware about and associate with myself with it. But you know, as always, as you present, is something that triggers my mind, and this is where I'm coming from. When you gave us the trends in biodiversity, you know, the framework trends, how we are going to start recovering, aren't we too ambitious? Given what is happening now when it comes in the space of degradation, you know, the resource-rich areas, Central Africa, the Congo Basin, what's happening in South America. And also, if you look at the NDCs, the previous presenter talked about them, our mitigation, our targets are not at that level that will bring us to start attaining gains. And we too ambitious? That's the question. Maybe we could reflect on that. Two, within the framework, I've had people, you know, panelists saying, and excellent work, good countries, Rwanda, Uganda, Ethiopia, Indonesia, these are the leaders. But do we have a financing section of framework, you know, with it, and what is it? And I'm happy I had everybody saying this is a general question also, but I didn't, this is the best thing I've had this morning. No development partner coming in to work with us. We're doing everything on our own. That's kudos if it's that case, but if there are others, please, you could be able to mention them. A question to Rwanda specifically, and this is sharing experience really. When it comes to green financing, interesting, you have the taxonomy and it's working with banks. But just sharing your experience, how is it working in terms of the uptake of the loans or the facilities that are available in the banks and the repayment? You know, is it easy? What are the challenges with that? Because that's where I want to go also. I would like to thank you. Thank you.
And we can take the last question that was by Christine.
Thank you, and thank you to the panel for the wonderful discussion.
You understood it?
My question is more really something I've been wondering. Before this GBF, we had the Aichi targets, which really this GBF is an extension of the Aichi targets. And I'm just wondering, what were the challenges? Because most of the targets were not met for the Aichi, particularly in developing countries. So what were the challenges there, and how are we looking to overcome these challenges with the new framework? Also, the targets for the new framework has been given a very short timeline, 2030. We are talking 2030, this is 2024. we are still talking about lack of data, silo approaches. So maybe what are the strategies to see to it that these targets are realistic and that they can really be met by 2030? Thank you.
Sorry, Christine, you direct the question to whom?
Probably Francis.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, thanks. So we have two questions, one for Juliet and next Francis. Please. You can start, Juliet. You can start.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the question from my brother is, what are the challenges in implementing the taxonomy, the ESGs that have been developed? I think, honestly speaking, I don't think our private sector is ready with this kind of terminologies, with this kind of indicators, asking them to report on this, or to even include in their business plan is still something new. And I'm talking about the private sector, and this can range from the person or the company that wants to go for these resources, or even the consultants on the market that need to be working on such business plans. So that has not come out so well, and I think this is kind of linked to the needs for capacity building, the whole of society. So these the Francises of this world might think it's obvious. It's not so obvious. So how do we break this down to a level that makes sense to everyone across the board? And I'm very excited that we are discussing this in a workshop that was organized by the World Bank. The World Bank knows the importance of such. It also knows the importance of having private sector resources, but also having something that is bankable, projects that are bankable. How we develop the capacity to trickle through all those layers is very important. But in a nutshell, I think we don't have the right capacity. There are resources that were raised by the Rwanda Green Fund in one of the facilities and put in the custody to be implemented by the BRD, the Development Bank of Rwanda, and call for proposals are on, but again, it becomes an issue to have the right proposal with the right indicators. Yeah, we are not yet there. So even the burning rate of these resources from these institutions is not as fast as we want it to be. And of course, this has an effect on who else is going to push money into that docket if it's not like fast moving. So I think that's the challenge that I know of as of now. Thank you.
Thanks, Juliet. And I'll ask Francis to take the last question, please.
Do you hear me? Yeah. So I think I'll start with the 2030, but this is not a short time, then the ambition thing. Now, 2030, when we are developing the framework itself, as you could have seen from my presentation, the understanding was, and as I've said several, that biodiversity cannot just be something standing alone out there, but countries saw a lot of linkage of biodiversity to achievement of the SDGs, and therefore began looking at the timeline when the SDG is going to come to, and that is 2030. So that is how it was linked there, so that it will give us opportunity at that time also to really look at what has been the contribution of biodiversity to implementing of the SDGs. So at that time, that's why I said they are the 2030 action targets. So by 2030, again, there will be a review to look at whether those targets have been achieved or we need to continue with them, or some of them could have totally been achieved. So that is how it was set. And there was a lot of debate whether we should take it to 2035, 2032, because of the time lost, the 4 years. But the understanding was stick to 2030, and then you move on from there. The other one is, what were the challenges? The challenges we faced with the IH targets is now more or less what you see happening up front. The IH target 1, resource mobilization was poorly done at the time. When the framework was adopted in 2010, that was when we started running around looking for how to really mobilize resources for it. But this time, as you have seen, there is already the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund, which is there and it's already operationalized. And there's a chance that we could have one coming from DSI, Digital Sequence Information. The other one was capacity building. Again, we started thinking about what capacity we need for implementing that strategic plan after. And there was a lot of disagreement, always postponing the discussion to the next COP to the next COP. Also, there were no indicators properly put in place at the time. But now we have the monitoring indicators, like you've seen in those decisions I was telling you. So there was a lot of lessons learned, and we used that now to make sure that most of those were in place. Lastly, from being too ambitious, I tell you, this was it. During the development of the framework, at one point, when we presented the first draft, we were told you are not ambitious. This draft lacks ambition. So we said, all right, here we go. When it came to target 1, we said all areas should be under spatial planning. You see, the thing is that if you're as ambitious as that and you get to, I don't know, 50 or 60, maybe you'll have moved. But if now you put it 50, then how people kind of, slacken a little. So that is how it came about. The other one, like target 2, it was 20% degraded, it went to 30. Protected areas, it went to 30. So the thing was that the first draft, they said we were less ambitious, and therefore it would just not, attract a lot of, you call it, other patterns or other people seeing that there is something we want to challenge people to do. So it's more of challenging ourselves to do better. If we can get 100% in the next 5 years, I don't know. At least I will be there to witness that. But that was how it came about. Parties demanded that we grade up and put it more ambitious. Yeah. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And thanks for all the panelists. Please join me again with a great applause for these interventions. And thank all of you for being here.
Thank you so much. Another round of applause. Also to the panelists and to Matthias. This has been a very rich discussion, how we link the NBSAP to the Global Biodiversity Framework to the financing. So we hope to build up on that. But it's time for us to take a short break. I think we do need it. So we will break from now and come back at 3:15. So exactly 3:15, let's get back here for the next session, which is now looking at private finance in biodiversity. So exactly building up on the discussion we've had with this panel. So thank you so much, and we appreciate your contribution.